for by taxpayers. About 40% of the UC system paid for by taxpayers. Now, highly subsidized, good thing. I think that's a fantastic investment. And so even though fees have gone up a lot, it's still a great value, great deal compared to other states. We should appreciate that, what taxpayers are doing here. It's still a massive investment. I don't support any more fee increases because that would just make it unaffordable. And I think one of the real fantastic things about California is that our higher education system is so affordable for so many people. I do think it's hard to transfer from one part of the higher education system to another. I think that needs to be streamlined. But the bottom line is, as governor, you got to set priorities. We have about $85 billion that comes into the state of California right now, even during the middle of this recession, $85 billion. And so how are you going to spend it? How are you going to prioritize it? I mentioned my top priority is individual liberty, public safety. That's going to be my top priority. But right up there, close to the top, is my support for education in general and higher education in particular. And right now, we just don't have the money. We don't have the money to invest in higher education the way we'd like to. We don't have the money to invest in K through 12. Don't have the money to fix our water infrastructure. Don't have the money to fix our broken healthcare system. So honestly, when people say we need more money here, there, or whatever, well, have they checked? We're bankrupt, effectively. We don't have money. We're out of cash. Worst credit rating in the country. So we've got to balance the budget once and for all, and then we have to fix our economy so we can get California back on track. And then when we have revenues coming in from a healthy economy, then I can assure you one of my top priorities will make sure that the higher education system gets fully funded.
Now, part of your budget platform is a top-down review and overhaul of state government to realize some savings there. Sort of a two-part question. How do you estimate that $3.85 billion that you'd save in that overhaul if you haven't done it yet? And B, the census says that California, at least in 2008, had the third lowest number of full-time equivalent state government employees in the country, and also had the fifth lowest ratio of K-12 education employees, 19% below the national average. So are we really so bloated?
Well, when Governor Schwarzenegger took over a few years ago, we had 300,000 state employees. We now have 350,000 state employees. Government spending has basically doubled in the last 15 years or so. We know for sure we can't keep up at that pace. That's a fact. And my experience at the Department of Insurance is that even though there was a lot of fantastic people there, and there still are, and it's a great team, there's just huge amounts of inefficiency and waste. So one way I was able to shrink my operating budget by 15% was to infuse some new technology. Let me just give you one quick example, and let me talk about my $3.85 billion plan. Now, any insurance agents or brokers here? Just curious. No one in the insurance industry. The insurance commissioner comes to speak in the East Bay, and not anyone from the insurance industry. What is that? Yeah, maybe it's a good sign, because if they weren't happy, they'd be here, I can tell you that. There's over 300,000 insurance agents and brokers in California. And they can't sell insurance without a license from me and my team. That's the way it works. And the licenses are good for 2 years. And every 2 years, we do a criminal background check to make sure that they're not breaking any laws. And then we give them a test to make sure they're keeping up on insurance issues. So when I got to the Department of Insurance 3 years ago, it was all paper-based. These 300,000 applications coming in, I mean, it took dozens of people and months to go through. We automated the whole thing. And so even though my operating budget's down, with some technology, we've cut the processing time from months to days, and the number of people way down. And now the whole thing's automated. So across the state of California. So I have this experience of doing it. I mean, you're looking at someone who's actually taken a very large state agency and right-sized it. So I've looked at the other 399 state departments and state agencies, and we've examined their operating structures at a high level. And we think it's a pretty conservative estimate that we can get the same kind of 15% savings in operating expenses at every department and every agency, because none of them have been overhauled and modernized. And if you look at their operating budgets, that comes to $3.85 billion. And that's, an $85 billion budget, we don't think that's being overly optimistic.
Another hybrid question. Do you support, to talk a little bit about your position on offshore drilling here, and also that there is a bill pending in the legislature right now that would impose an oil severance tax, which is something that most oil-producing states have, in order to raise funds specifically for higher education. What do you think of that idea?
Right. Well, I just don't support any tax increases on just any tax increase. Because if you have to ask yourself, by raising taxes, are we going to get more employment or less employment? And the answer is going to be less employment. Now, oil companies aren't getting away with any particular bargain here. They pay property taxes, they pay high corporate income taxes, they pay all kinds of taxes. If you look at their total tax burden, then they're paying a lot of taxes. And so it's not like they're skating away without any paying their fair share. I think they are. So raising taxes is just going to discourage them from expanding here, and that's to be a mistake in the middle of this recession when we need jobs. With regards to offshore oil drilling, I support it. I support it because in the last few years, there's been remarkable progress in this slant drilling technology, and also in the stability of these offshore platforms. Take a look at Katrina, that terrible disaster. Now, those hurricanes impacted at least 100 offshore oil platforms off the Gulf Coast. And there was a very, very small amount of oil seepage from Katrina. And it was impressive, to be honest with you, how the offshore oil industry held up nicely in that terrible disaster. Now here in California, we have a bunch of offshore platforms. I wouldn't build any new ones, but I would allow some additional drilling using this new slant drilling technology off of existing platforms. There are billions and billions of barrels of oil off our coastline. We don't have to take any environmental risks here. We have to make sure they use this new modern slant drilling technology, which can be used off of an existing platform or onshore to offshore. And honestly, if we're willing to drive around and consume lots of gas and use a lot of oil in other parts of our economy here, why shouldn't we become more self-sufficient? Why is it okay for Saudi Arabia or Texas or Louisiana to do it, but we won't do it here? It's just not right.
You're listening to the Commonwealth Club of California radio program. Our guest today is Steve Poizner, California Insurance Commissioner and Republican candidate for Governor of California. Let's do some rapid-fire word association here. Tea Party.
Is this like password?
Yes. Tea Party.
Individual liberty, free markets, lower taxes. I like what the Tea Party movement's up to. I think they're on the right track. Very good.
Gun control.
Big believer in the Second Amendment. People have a right to bear arms. The Constitution is crystal clear about it.
Water, or the lack thereof.
Man-made crisis. I don't know if you've been to the Central Valley. Can I explain just a little there? Please. Thank you. Central Valley devastation. 30,000 farm workers, met with a lot of them, lost their jobs because of man-made water crisis. About $1 billion of crop damage. Now, the pumps in the Delta have been turned off by court order. One unelected federal judge has taken over the water supply of the state of California. There's rationing going on now in San Diego. It's just not right. Now, when I taught 12th grade American government, I had the honor and the privilege of teaching the Constitution, the Bill of Rights. One of my favorite amendments to the Constitution, well, the freedom of the press is my favorite on behalf of the Chronicle. But the 10th Amendment is one of my favorites too. The 10th Amendment is the States' Rights Amendment. And I really do think that elected officials here in California need to make the trade-offs about how to deal with our water supply and not the federal government. And as governor, if we still have this problem, I will appeal this federal decision all the way to the U.S. Supreme Court based on states' rights issues. We've got to turn those pumps back on. We really do, because the environmental damage and the damage to farm workers and farmers have been just terrible. Now, on the other hand, I also support investing more in our water infrastructure. We haven't really expanded our water infrastructure in decades. We need more water infrastructure, and there we need to step up and make those long-term investments.
Question from the audience. Tax cuts take time to result in economic growth. How do you fund the deficit in the meantime?
I think it's a great question because people assume that there's some big delay. And so, I was worried about that too. You know, I'm